Hello everyone, it's Bieler, and here we have another event, so that means another set of challenges. Now, hopefully all of you enjoyed your Halloween, but Zalone decided to close that off with a very spooky challenge here. And by spooky, of course, I mean really annoying. So the basic gist of this fight is that you have two bosses here that throw around a lot of debuffs, and you're given a preset team of units that can do a little bit of healing and a little bit of cleansing. So the first thing you see me do here is to actually just walk up Akka and not attack anything, and the reason I do that is because the Claret here actually has a damage buff that goes up as her HP goes down. She makes the Juggler do more damage, and your first priority target should be the Juggler anyway. So attacking Claret right at the start is just going to make the whole fight harder for you. It's really obvious they're trying to bait you into doing that because of the starting positions. You can just run Akka up and attack Claret immediately. You can still win even if you do that, it's just that it makes things a little bit harder for you, and this fight has quite a bit of RNG. And speaking of RNG, what you're about to see is that Claret is about to cast her Black Hole spell. Well, actually, this is not a Black Hole spell, it just looks like Black Hole. It actually doesn't do any debuffs. But this Claret boss does give out a random debuff at the end of every one of her turns. And of course, the debuff list for this stupid boss is the very annoying list. You got all the powerful debuffs in there. Now, to be fair, a lot of them aren't a huge deal. If you get passive blocked or buff blocked, it's not the end of the world. But this first turn, if Akka gets silenced or something, I would probably just instantly restart because there's just no reason for you to have to deal with that. Afterwards, I'm going to move Ivar into Claret's range instead, so I don't have to worry about silences as much. But you still need to worry about heal blocks, and just like the stupid PvP meta right now, the heal blocks can end your game here. But now let's talk about the coronavirus debuff that this Juggler does. So if you don't practice safe social distancing here, your units are just going to hurt each other. You might notice that I purposefully ended Akka's turn right next to Ivar, which hurt him, even though I could have easily just run very far away. Now, the main reason I did this is because I wanted to maintain Scylla's talent on this map, which is that she gets more attack and defense for every unit within 2 blocks of her. Scylla is probably your biggest DPS unit here, as well as one of your most sturdy. She is able to ignore defense with one of her skills and then use Aqua Blast, which of course is one of the strongest attack skills in the game. You might have also noticed that about 10 seconds ago I cast Gospel on Ivar, which you might find kind of an odd choice, but the main reason I did that is because Ivar was the target of the random debuff that Juggler gives out. This debuff stuns you at the end of the first turn after it's cast on you, and it also poisons you for 30% HP damage for 3 turns. Now, the Ticken debuff itself is actually undispellable and unresistible, but you can actually resist the stun portion of it, and the fact that Juggler casts this every 3 turns kind of indicates to the player that you're supposed to use Gospel to stop the stun part of this ability. Even your crappiest unit like Ivar getting stunned on this map can actually be very annoying, because the DPS check can end up being kind of tight, especially if you lose a unit somewhere along the way. Now, the poison part of the debuff isn't a big deal if it gets on Akka or Ivar because they have Dark Scythe, and it's not that huge a deal if it gets on Sophia because she can just heal herself. But if this debuff gets tagged onto Scylla, I would actually just recommend that you restart the map. It's not impossible to heal through it, but it's just such a huge pain in the ass. After you've gotten your units into position, the rest of the fight is really just you applying your general knowledge of the game, using a bit of common sense and a lot of prayer to hope that you're not going to get a heal blocked at some point. I should also note that the heal block from Claret is a 2-turn heal block. That especially is why heal blocks from her are pretty much a game ender here. It is true you are given a really strong AoE heal on Akka, but because your AoE heals are so sparse in this map, you're often going to be using Akka's heal as an actual heal, and not as a cleanse. Anyway, I guess I will also give you some general tips on how to use some of these units. For Scylla, I highly recommend using Tidal Surge first and then her Absolute Authority skill, which gives her the defense ignore, as well as immunity to all debuffs. The reason for this should be fairly obvious. Tidal Surge would tick down to Absolute Authority faster if you used it the other way around. As nice as the extra defense from being in water would be, keeping up Absolute Authority for as long as possible is obviously a lot more useful. It makes it so that at the very least for Scylla, you don't need to worry as much about some game-ending debuff sticking onto her. And because of the positioning I'm showing here, Ivar and Scylla are usually going to be the only ones in range of Claret's random debuffs. Ivar is probably the least useful unit here, but of course the contradiction is that for that very reason he is useful, because these two bosses have a talent that says that if you don't have a certain number of people in range of them, they'll just go apeshit and do a map-wide AoE at you. Now, unlike something we see quite often, this map-wide AoE actually doesn't just instantly kill you or anything like that. It only does moderate damage, but because healing is so lacking on this map, it's usually in your best interest to not take them anyway. Still, because it is not a deadly AoE, there's actually a couple situations, usually after you've killed Juggler and maybe you need to regroup, you can actually back off and just let Claret spam that AoE a little bit while Akka's AoE heal comes back up. That situation is unlikely to come up in most of you guys' runs, but it's just something to keep in mind if you have a run that gets very close and you want to risk it. Anyway, like I said, Ivar is probably your least important unit here. You want him around to drain all the debuffs from Claret while Juggler is still around. Once Juggler dies, it's less of a big deal if Ivar dies as well. Now for Akka, like I said before, you should probably use her AoE heal as an AoE heal and not as a cleanse. Even though it does remove 5 debuffs, because of the way this map is set up, and how some of the most annoying debuffs on this map actually cannot be dispelled at all, it should just be used as another healer. Finally, the timing of Rewind from Sophia is very important, obviously. The most useful thing about Rewind here is to try to keep continuous absolute authority on your Scylla, but just try to make sure you burn all your big CDs on your other characters before you cast Rewind so you can get the most out of it. Anyway, you can see that I just successfully took down Juggler here. If you can make it this far without losing of your units, you should be home free. I don't think there's a whole lot else to say about this fight. So may your RNG be blessed. I'll see you guys next time.
お、はい。きっとできるしか。